The house was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy but not unwelcome. I was sprawled on the couch, a bowl of popcorn resting precariously on my stomach, while the credits of some forgettable movie rolled on the TV. Natomy Brother was sitting on the floor, his back against the couch, flipping through his phone. Our parents were away for the weekend, leaving us to our own devices, and for the most part, it had been uneventful, just the usual junk food games and the kind of mindless banter that comes. "With years of familiarity, you're hugging the popcorn," Nate said, without looking up, his tone teasing but light. I tossed a kernel at his head. "You're the one who said you didn't want any. That was an hour ago." "People change." You know, he turned his head just enough to glance at me, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. His eyes caught the dim light from the TV, and for a second I hesitated. Something about the way he looked at me felt different, like there was a question hidden behind his words, or maybe I was imagining it. We'd always been close, but in that moment the air between us felt charged like the calm before a storm. I shifted uncomfortably, suddenly hyper-aware of how close he was. The back of his shoulder brushed against my knee, and I felt a jolt. A spark that I couldn't quite explain. I pulled my legs up, tucking them underneath me, and forced a laugh. "Fine, take it. I was getting bored of it anyway." He reached up without looking, his fingers grazing mine as he took the bowl. The touch lingered, a heartbeat. Too long, and I felt my breath catch. What's going on? I thought, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't like us. We weren't the kind of siblings who overthought casual touches, and yet, there I was overthinking it. The next few hours passed in a blur. We played a few rounds of Mario Kart, trash talked to each other mercilessly, and argued over what to order for dinner. But there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Every time our hands brushed, every time our eyes met, it felt like the room was shrinking, like we were the only two people in the world. Later that night, we were back on the couch, a blanket draped over both of us, as we scrolled through Netflix trying to find something to watch. Nate was closer. This time his shoulder pressed against mine, and I could feel the warmth of his body seeping into mine. My heart was racing again, and I couldn't tell if it was the proximity or something else entirely. "Why are you so tense?" he asked, suddenly, his voice low and soft. I froze, my fingers hovering over the remote. "I'm not tense." "Yeah, you are. You've been weird all day?" He turned to look at me. His expression unreadable. "What's going on?" He swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "What's going on?" I wanted to scream the question back at him, but instead I just shook my head. Nothing, just tired, I guess. He didn't believe me. I could tell his eyes searched mine, and for a moment I thought he might say something more, but then he looked away and the tension in the room seemed to dissipate. Leaving me both relieved and disappointed, we finally settled on a movie, but I couldn't focus every time he shifted. Every time he laughed at something on the screen, I was hyper-aware of his presence, and then halfway through the movie it happened. He reached over to grab the remote, his hand accidentally brushing against mine, and this time, neither of us pulled away, our fingers tangled together, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, feel the heat of his skin against mine. I glanced at him, and he was already looking at me. His eyes dark and unreadable. There was a question in his gaze when I didn't know how to answer, and then before I could think, before I could stop myself, I leaned in. It wasn't a conscious decision, more like a reflex, like the pull of a magnet. "This is wrong," a voice whispered in the back of my mind, but I ignored it. My lips brushed against his, barely a touch, and then he was kissing me back, his hand cupping my face like I was something precious. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but it didn't stay that way. It deepened, becoming something else, entirely something that left me breathless and dizzy. My hands found their way to his chest, and I could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath my fingertips. What are we doing, I thought. But I didn't pull away. I couldn't. When we finally broke apart, neither of us spoke. The room was silent except for the sound of our breathing, heavy and uneven. I searched mine, and I could see the same conflict in his gaze, that I felt in my chest guilt, desire, confusion. It was all there swirling together in a messy chaotic storm. I started, but he cut me. Off, don't he? Whispered, his voice rough. Just don't, I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We sat there for what felt like an eternity. The weight of what had just happened hanging heavy in the air. Between us, I didn't know what this meant, what it would do to us, but one thing was, clear things between us would never be. The same again, the silence between us stretched thick and unyielding. Nate's hand still rested lightly on my arm, the warmth of his touch seeping into my skin, a reminder of what had just happened. I could feel my heart pounding, the rhythm erratic, and loud in my ears. My thoughts were a jumble, a storm of emotions. I couldn't begin to untangle what have we just done. Nate was the first to move, pulling his hand away slowly as if he wasn't sure he wanted to let go. He leaned back against the couch, his eyes fixed on the blank TV screen in front of us. I stole a glance at him, noticing the way his jaw clenched, the tension in shoulders. He looked the way I felt, torn, unsure, and maybe a little scared. He started, then stopped running, a hand through his hair. His voice was quiet, hesitant. We should probably just forget. That happened? I nodded, but the word forget felt wrong. Like a lead, neither of us believed I couldn't forget, not the way his lips had felt against mine, not the way my body had responded, not the way something inside me had shifted like a door opening to a room I'd never dared to enter. Yeah, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Forget it, but we didn't. The air between us still crackled with something unspoken, something that lingered even as we both tried to pretend it wasn't there. We sat in silence. For a while, the distance between us growing wider. Even though we were still so close, I wanted to say something, anything to break the tension. But the words stuck in my throat. Eventually, Nate stood up, his movement stiff and deliberate. I'm going to bed, he said, not looking at me. It's late. Okay, I replied, my voice small. I watched him walk away, his figure disappearing down the hallway, and felt the pang of something I couldn't quite name. Loneliness, regret, guilt, maybe all of the above. When I finally went to bed, I lay awake for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling. My mind kept replaying the kiss, the way Nate had looked at me, the way my body had reacted. I wanted to hate myself for it, for letting it happen, but I couldn't. The truth was, I wanted. I still wanted it, and that scared me more than anything. The next morning, I woke up late, the sunlight streaming through the curtains. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavy, like it was waiting for something to happen. I hesitated before, leaving my room unsure of what to expect. Would things be awkward between us? Would we ignore what had happened? Would we talk about it? I didn't know what I wanted the answer to. I found Nate in the kitchen making coffee. He glanced up when I walked. In his expression unreadable. Morning, he said, his voice neutral. Morning, I replied. My voice equally guarded. I hovered in the doorway, unsure of what to do or say. The silence between us felt different, now charged with something I couldn't quite put into words. Nate poured a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter to me without a word. I took it, our fingers brushing briefly, and felt a jolt of electricity run through me. I didn't know if he felt it too, but the way he quickly pulled his hand back made me think he did. We stood there in silence for a while, sipping our coffee, the tension between us growing with each passing second. I could feel my heart starting to race again, my palms getting sweaty. This is ridiculous, I thought. We can't just stand here like this. Nate started, but he cut me off again, his voice tight. Don't, he said, his eyes meeting mine for the first time that morning. There was something in his gaze, something raw and vulnerable that made my breath catch. Just don't. Okay, not right now. I nodded, swallowing the words I've been about to say. I didn't know what I've been going to say anyway. Sorry, mumbled, looking down at my coffee. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's fine, he said, his voice softer now. We need to figure this out, but not now. I nodded again, feeling a strange mix of relief and disappointment. We didn't talk about it for the rest of the morning, but the tension between us didn't go away. It was there, simmering just beneath the surface every time we looked. At each other every time our hands brushed, every time we stood too close. We spent the day trying to act normal, but it was a losing battle. We played a game of cards, but neither of us was really paying attention. We watched a movie, but I couldn't tell. You what? It was about every little thing felt heightened, like the world had suddenly become more intense, more vivid, and I couldn't escape it. By the time evening rolled around, the tension was unbearable. We were sitting on the couch again, just like the night before, but this time the air between us felt electric, like a storm about to break. I could feel Nate's presence beside me, so close and yet so far away. I wanted to reach out to touch him, to say something. But I didn't know how then, suddenly, he turned. To me, his eyes dark and intense. "We can't keep pretending like nothing happened," he said, his voice low and rough. I felt my breath catch, my heart starting to rise. "I know," I whispered, my voice trembling. He reached out his hand brushing against mine, and I felt a shiver run through me. "I've been trying to ignore it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I can't. I can't." I looked at him, my chest stashing with the weight of everything. "Feeling me neither," I admitted, my voice breaking. He moved closer, his eyes searching mine, and I felt a surge of something I couldn't name, desire, fear, hope, whatever it was overwhelming, all-consuming, and then, before I could think, before I could stop myself, he leaned, enclosing the distance between us. This kiss was different from the one before. It was slower, softer, but no less intense. It felt like a confession, like a release, like something we'd both been holding back for far too long. I could feel the tension between us melting away, replaced by something deeper, something more real. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, our breaths mingling, our hearts pounding in unison. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the same conflict I felt in my chest. But there was something else there too, something that made my stomach flip, something that made me want to hold on to this moment forever. "We need to talk," he said finally, his voice rough but gentle. "About what this means, about what we're doing," I knotted, my throat tight. "I know," I whispered, "but not now." "Not yet," he hesitated, then nodded, his hand still resting lightly on mine. "Not yet," he agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. We sat there in silence for a while, our hands intertwined, the weight of what had just happened settling over us. I didn't know what this meant, what it would do to us, but one thing was clear. Here, things between us would never be the same again. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. The next morning I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window, their cheerful songs, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that had settled between Nate and me. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding as I replayed the events of the previous night in my mind. His hand in mine, the intensity of his gaze, the way his lips had felt against mine. "What are we doing?" The question looped in my head unanswered. I dragged myself out of bed and padded downstairs, my bare feet whispering against the cool hardwood floor. Nate was already in the kitchen, standing by the counter with a mug of coffee in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt charged. "Like a storm waiting to break morning," he said finally, his voice low and steady. He set the mug down and turned to face me fully. "His expression unreadable morning," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I moved to the coffee maker, my hands trembling slightly. As I poured myself a cup, the silence stretched heavy and suffocating until I couldn't take it anymore. "Nate, don't he?" interrupted, his voice firm, but not unkind. He took a step closer, his eyes searching mine. "Don't try to pretend it didn't happen. I can't." I looked away, my cheeks burning. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice trembling. It's too much." He reached out his fingers, brushing against my arm, and I felt the shiver run down my spine. I know he said softly, but we can't keep ignoring. We need to figure this out. I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. Figure what out, Nate? What exactly are we supposed to do? He hesitated, his hand dropping to his side. I don't know. He admitted, his voice thick with uncertainty. But I know that I can't just pretend it didn't happen. I can't pretend that I don't feel something. I stared at him, my mind racing. Something, that word was both a lifeline and a curse. It was vague, undefined, but it carried a weight that made my stomach churn. Nate, it's not right, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We're family. Hef flinched, his jaw tightening. I know, he said sharply. Do you think I haven't thought about that? Do you think I haven't been tearing myself apart over this? I bit my lip, my eyes filling with tears. Then why, Nate, why did you kiss me? Why did you let this happen? He took a step closer, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made my breath catch because I couldn't help it. He said, his voice low and rough, because every time I look at you, I feel something I can't explain, something I can't ignore. I stare at him, my heart pounding in my chest. His words were like a fire burning away the fragile walls I built around my emotions. I wanted to protest, to tell him that this was wrong, that we couldn't do this. But the truth was, I felt it too. That something, it was there, undeniable, and it scared me more than anything. Nate, I whispered, my voice trembling. I don't know what to do. He reached out, his hand cupping my cheek, and I felt the shiver run through me. Neither do I, he admitted, his eyes searching mine, but I know I can't walk away from this, not from you. I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch, the warmth of his hand grounding me. This is going to change everything, I said, softly. I know, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze, and for the first time I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could navigate this, maybe we could find a way to make this work. But the fear was still there, lurking in the back of my mind, a constant reminder of the risks we were taking. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the moment, and we both, our parents, were home. Nate had dropped his hand, stepping back, and I quickly wiped my eyes, trying to compose myself. The familiarity of the morning shattered, replaced by the weight of our secret. The door opened, and our parents walked in, laughing and chatting, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air. Nate and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between us. We'd figure this out somehow. But as I watched him turn to greet our parents, his mask of normally firmly in place, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to fall apart. The house felt different now. The air was heavier, charged with something I couldn't quite name. Our parents were back, their laughter filling the space, but it didn't reach me. Not really. My eyes kept drifting to Nate, watching how he moved, how he spoke, how he existed in this new reality where everything between us had changed. He was so normal with them, so carefree, and I hated how good he was at it. I hated how it made me feel like I was the only one who was unraveling. Did you two have a good weekend? Mom asked, sitting down, her bed bags in the kitchen. Her voice was light, oblivious, and I forced a smile. Yeah, it was quiet, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Nate shot me a glance, his smirk barely there, and I felt my chest tighten. Quiet. That was one way to put it. Good, Dad said, clapping Nate on the shoulder. You two holding down the fort while we're gone, no wild parties. Nate laughed, easy and natural. Yeah, no wild parties, just movies and stuff. His eyes met mine for a split second, and I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. Stuff that word so innocent carried the weight of everything we'd done, everything we'd felt. I turned away, pretending to busy myself with helping unpack groceries, but my hands were trembling. I could still feel the ghost of his touch, the way his lips had felt against mine. It was all I could think about, even as my parents chatted around me, even as the world moved on like nothing had happened later. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet again. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the only sound. My mind was racing, replaying every moment, every look, every word. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. But what other choice did I have? There was a soft knock at my door, and my heart leapt into my throat. I knew who. It was before Ivan opened it. Nate stood there, his face shadowed in the dim light of the hallway. He looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way I wasn't used to seeing. "Can I come in?" Hesked, his voice low. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He closed the door behind him, and for a moment we just stood there staring at each other. The tension between us was almost unbearable, thick and suffocating. "I can't sleep," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I keep thinking about everything." "Me too," whispered my voice, barely audible. He took a step closer, and I felt my breath catch his eyes. Were intense, searching mine for something, for answers, for understanding, for something. I didn't know what to give him. "What are we doing?" "Name," he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "This us, it's... I don't know how to do this." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I don't know either, but I know I can't just pretend it didn't happen." He nodded, his expression softening. "Neither can I." He reached out, his fingers brushing against mine, and I felt the jolt of electricity shoot through me. His touch was so familiar, yet so different now, charged with something deeper, something more. I couldn't pull away. I didn't want to. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice trembling. What if we ruin everything?" Has stepped closer, his hand cupping my cheek, and I felt my eyes flutter closed. "Well, might," he whispered. "But what if we don't? What if this is the best thing that's ever happened to us?" I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he was right. Maybe we could find a way to make this work. Maybe we could have us without losing everything else. His lips brushed against mine, soft and tentative, and I felt my heart surge. I kissed him back, my hands gripping the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. It was different this time, slower, more deliberate, like we were both trying to figure out what this meant. Where it was going, we broke apart, breathless, our foreheads resting against each other. His eyes were dark, filled with something I couldn't quite place. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice firm, determined. "Together." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "Together," but as Wes stood there wrapped in each other, I couldn't shake the fear that lingered in the back of my mind, the fear that this, whatever this was, was too fragile, too dangerous, the fear that no matter how much we wanted it, it might not be enough. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. My parents were laughing, and for a moment I allowed myself to believe that everything was normal, that nothing had changed. But then I remembered, and the weight of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. I got dressed and headed downstairs, my stomach in knots. Nate was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, a cup of coffee in his hands. He looked up when I walked in, and our eyes met. There was a flicker of something warm, something hours before. He looked away. "Morning," he said, his voice casual, but there was a slight edge to it. "Morning," I mumbled, grabbing a bowl and pouring cereal. I could feel my parents' eyes on me, and I avoided looking at them, focusing instead on the task at hand. Act normal, that was the mantra in my head. Act normal. "So, name," Dad said, breaking the silence. "Any plans for the day?" I shrugged, keeping my gaze on my cereal. "Not really. Just stuff." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Nate freeze, his grip tightening on his coffee cup. "Stuff." That word again, heavy with meaning. I felt my face heat up, and I quickly shoveled a spoonful of cereal into my mouth, hoping to hide my reaction. The day dragged on, every moment filled with tension. Nate and I avoided each other as much as possible. But every time our eyes met, it was like the air between us crackled with electricity. I want to talk to him, to figure out what we were doing. But there was never a moment when we were alone. My parents were always there, and it was driving me crazy finally. As the sun began to set, I found myself out on the back porch staring at the fading light. The door creaked open, and I knew without turning that it was Nate. He stepped up beside me, his presence instantly warming me. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey." We stood there in silence for a while. Watching the sky turn from orange to deep blue, the tension between us was thick, but there was also a sense of comfort. Like no matter what happened, we had each other. "We need to talk," he said, finally breaking the silence. I nodded, my heart racing. "Yeah, we do." He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "I don't want to lose you." He said, his voice raw with emotion. "I don't want to ruin what we have. But I can't pretend this isn't happening. I can't pretend I don't feel this." I felt my breath catch my chest tightening. "I don't want to lose you either," I whispered, "but I'm scared. I'm so scared, Nate." He reached out, his hand brushing against mine, and I felt the surge of warmth. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice steady, one step at a time. Together I nodded, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. One step at a time, he pulled me into his arms, and I felt myself melding to him. His embrace was familiar, safe, but there was something new there too, something deeper, something more. It scared me. But it also gave me hope, because no matter what happened, we had each other. And maybe that would be enough. But as we stood there wrapped in each, I couldn't shake the fear that lingered in the back of my mind, the fear that whatever this was too fragile, too dangerous, the fear that no matter how much we wanted it, it might not be enough off.